Don't live it up on someone else's dime, you parasite. My husband and I, along with my brother and his wife, found ourselves on an overseas trip due to certain circumstances. We managed to get under Belle's skin, leading to her hurling insults at us at the airport. Enraged, Belle started shouting and telling us to go back to America. My husband burst into laughter at her words. All right then, let's head back home. With that, our long-awaited counterattack began. My name is Catherine. I'm a 41-year-old housewife. I work at a supermarket checkout and have a good relationship with my colleagues. My husband Luke is 3 years older than me and works for a major electronics manufacturer. He's currently the manager of the General Affairs Department and is rumored to be a candidate for the next department head. My husband, who is deeply trusted by his subordinates and is very dedicated to his work, is a source of pride for me. One day, out of the blue, my brother Mike, who is a lawyer, paid us a visit. My brother and I have always been close, often sharing meals together. My husband has treated my brother like his own, and the three of us going out for meals was one of my joys. However, since my brother got married, these outings have become much less frequent. I've been avoiding Belle, my sister-in-law, because we don't get along, which has also reduced the time I spend with my brother. And now, suddenly, my brother had come to our house. Naturally, my husband and I were both surprised and asked him what was going on. I need a favor from you guys. We could tell something serious was up from the grave tone in which my brother started the conversation. He pulled out several photos and a voice recorder from his pocket and spread them out on the living room table for us to see. Belle, she's cheating. There in the photos was Belle, arm in arm with a man, presumably her lover, heading to a hotel. The voice recorder contained Belle's voice, affectionately talking on the phone with her lover at home. Conclusive evidence of her infidelity was right there. While Mike is at work, what is she doing? This is unbelievable. I was more furious than the person involved. It's absurd to stay silent when your dear family is being treated so terribly. I stood up from the sofa, pointing at the photos and raising my voice. But my voice halted abruptly when I saw someone in the pictures. Hey, Mike, the person in this photo is... Just as I thought. I came here to confirm that too. Convinced by my brother's words, I exclaimed in surprise. What? My sudden outburst startled my husband, who clutched his heart and said, You scared me. Don't shout all of a sudden. What's going on? This guy, he was my classmate in middle school. He was known for playing baseball, being irresponsible, and being a notorious womanizer. As I pointed to the face of the man in the photo and explained, this time it was my husband who raised his voice. You're being loud too, I sternly told him, to which my husband gave a wry smile and sheepishly scratched the back of his head. Unfazed by our shock, my brother continued. I'm going to divorce her, but honestly, I can't stand the thought of just letting her get away with this, so I need your help. Help? With what? My husband was puzzled by my brother's request. My brother explained that he wanted to ask if my husband's friend David could help. Honestly, I don't think anything I or Catherine say will affect her. She might be scared of Luke's dad, David. I think he could really make an impact. Come to think of it, at our wedding, she was terribly scolded by David and ended up crying. I remembered at our wedding, when Belle, who was still just dating my brother, came into the dressing room. Until then, I hadn't had a bad impression of Belle. I thought her over-the-top behavior was just teasing, so I mostly ignored it. But it turned out she was mocking me. The turning point was during our wedding. As soon as Belle entered the dressing room, she burst out laughing at me. Pointing at me in my bridal gown, she started mocking me. You? In pure white? You're already pale and chubby. The white dress just makes you look even bigger. Belle was taking pleasure in ridiculing me. I was about to snap at her, despite her being overweight herself. But luckily, my father-in-law David was there too. He had been quietly reading a book nearby until my husband returned to the dressing room. David closed his book, slowly approached Belle, and began to confront her.
Hey you, what do you think you're doing? Speaking like that to my son's bride?
Belle's inexcusable remark had caught David's attention, and now this formidable man, easily over 6 feet tall, was towering over 5-foot-tall Belle, intimidatingly demanding her to repeat what she said. David, naturally intimidating with his rugged features, would scare anyone at such close quarters. As expected, Belle looked like she was about to cry. It's not like that. I was just teasing, that's all. Belle's pitiful excuses didn't convince David at all.
Teasing? You find it funny to say such things? How old are you? You're not 3 years old to say such ridiculous things.
David, with his sound reasoning, pressed Belle, who was clearly shocked and started to cry, apologizing on the spot. I had to intervene to calm David down, as he seemed relentless in his scolding. Remembering this incident, I explained the situation to my husband, who immediately called David.
Hey Dad, it's been a while. Actually, I need a favor. Do you have a moment? Huh, long time no see. A favor, huh? If it's about money, I can't help you.
David joked heartily as he laughed. David, a straightforward and hearty man, is sincere and dedicated in his profession. He works in construction, traveling around the world. Currently, he is living in Indonesia, moving from one developing country to another. Bringing up such a matter to David, I knew it could lead to a scolding or being a nuisance to him, but we were prepared for that. My husband thought it would be better for my brother, who could explain the situation more calmly and accurately, to talk to David. We entrusted everything to my brother and asked him to explain the situation to David. Upon hearing it, David was furious.
That woman, I won't be satisfied until I show her a piece of hell. I'll re-educate her myself.
David, being family-oriented, was angrier than any of us and readily offered his help. Thus we decided on our revenge against Belle. When discussing how exactly to get back at Belle, David unsurprisingly suggested bringing her to him.
Unfortunately, it's still difficult for me to return to America. Why don't you bring that woman to Indonesia, telling her it's a trip abroad?
Contrary to our confusion, my brother was quick to respond.
Is that okay? I can bring her to Indonesia, but what should we do after that? Has the woman ever worked outside the home?
David seemed to have something in mind, as he first inquired about my brother's domestic situation.
She used to work in medical administration before marrying me, but has been a housewife since. She said she wanted to properly keep the house, and all that. What a load of nonsense. Luring men and then talking about keeping the house. I've decided, when she comes here, making sure her plane ticket is one way only.
What do you mean, David? We all exchanged surprised glances at David's statement. While we were confused, a mischievously laughing David could be heard on the other end of the phone.
I'll take care of that woman for a while. I've been short of hands and looking for help. Let her work hard for a while. Maybe get in some exercise, too.
David's words were laden with meaning, and I could almost see his wicked grin. I hear evil laughter. I swear never to make an enemy of this man, I thought to myself. Thus we decided on Belle's vacation trip, which was actually our revenge plan. We immediately began to put it into action. As instructed by David, we arranged a dinner with my brother and his wife and had my brother invite Belle on an overseas trip. Even though Belle threw veiled insults at us during the dinner, I didn't let it bother me. Now is the time to make fun of us like this. This is our last chance to mock us, I thought to myself. Finally, the day of departure arrived at the airport. We were astonished by Belle's extravagant attire. What are you wearing? We're going abroad, and you couldn't dress up more flamboyantly? Belle taunted us while putting on a large hat. To Indonesia? Does she think she's a celebrity? I wonder what this person is thinking. Are you planning to be a celebrity? Walking beside her was embarrassing, so we kept our distance and confirmed the plan with my brother. Having finished with baggage and security checks, I started whining to my brother about being hungry. Mike, aren't you hungry? I want to fill my stomach before we go.
Me too. I don't want to feel sick on an empty stomach. Then shall we go to a restaurant?
Wait, if we're going to a restaurant, let's split the bill. We're already paying for your trip. Belle insisted. As expected, Belle, who is very particular about money, reacted to our actions. She had even had a big argument with my brother over paying for this trip. Despite not earning the money herself, she was acting all high and mighty. My brother and I exchanged glances and laughed. Careful not to let Belle notice, as everything was going according to plan. We headed to a floor lined with restaurants and entered the most expensive one we had researched beforehand, ignoring Belle's attempts to stop us. We ordered the priciest dishes, 2 per person, and decided to drink wine. A whole bottle of wine was prepared, and the bill came out to a substantial amount. Wait a minute. You guys are paying for this, right? We're already spending most of our money on this trip. Belle was truly obsessed with money. Without a word, I handed the bill to my brother, who paid with his card. Belle, seeing this, started yelling at him. What are you doing? Why are we paying the whole amount when they're the ones eating like fools?
We invited them on this trip, right? It's only natural to treat them to a meal if we want them to enjoy themselves.
I can't believe this. Are you out of your mind? Belle continued to shout, regardless of being inside a restaurant. Successfully irritating Belle, we paid and finally boarded the plane. We enjoyed our flight in the first-class seats my brother had reserved. This too was part of the act to infuriate Belle. Throughout the flight, my husband and I continued to raise Belle's tension, enjoying expensive wines and appetizers. Belle, unable to scream on the plane, was visibly seething with anger. We found the entire situation amusing and continued to indulge in luxury while infuriating Belle. We can't help but find the scene strange. I was enjoying a momentary luxury as I continued to increase Belle's anger gauge. After nearly 8 hours, we finally landed. Though I wanted to stretch my legs after landing, we had one final act to perform. My husband and I, along with my brother, stopped at various souvenir shops in the Indonesian airport and bought a range of local products. What are you doing? We just got here. But we might get hungry at the hotel, right? Mike, can we buy this too?
Sure, go ahead. Luke, you too. Don't hold back. Thank you, Mike.
We ignored Belle and kept buying items, filling our basket with local specialties and unique shirts. With our hands full, we started heading to the car that was supposed to pick us up, and that's when it happened. Enough is enough, you guys. As we were leaving the airport entrance heading towards the parking lot, Belle suddenly screamed. The 3 of us exchanged glances and signaled each other with our eyes before turning dramatically towards her. What's wrong, Belle? You're shocking everyone around us. What's wrong? Your nerves. How much of someone else's money do you plan on spending? Mike, aren't you being ridiculous?
Why? It's a trip. We're supposed to enjoy it. If we don't, there's no point in bringing you along.
Belle, frustrated with no one taking her side, finally lashed out at us. Don't luxuriate on your husband's money, you parasites. We don't need you. Go back to America right now. My husband burst out laughing, as if he had been waiting for these words. Our long-awaited moment had arrived, and our counterattack was about to begin.
All right then, let's go back.
Laughing at Belle's words, my husband and I turned towards the airport, pretending to leave. Go, go. You're in the way. We're staying. Just go back on your own, you beggars. Her words were like those of a small child trying to stand up for themselves. My husband and I struggled to keep up the act, as we couldn't help but laugh at her ridiculous outbursts. Should not. We need to stay composed. If Belle finds out about our plan, it will all fall apart. As we were thinking this, Belle continued to hurl insults at us. Then suddenly, David appeared behind her.
"Why don't you just enjoy Indonesia with me alone?"
David said, placing his hand on Belle's shoulder and smiling broadly. Surprised by his voice and the touch on her shoulder, Belle jumped. Recognizing the familiar voice, her face drained of color, and she slowly turned around, terrified. Seeing David, Belle screamed and involuntarily sat down. Her ridiculous reaction made everyone but Belle burst into laughter. The response was so unexpected that we couldn't contain our laughter. Pretending to be surprised, my brother joked,
"What are you so shocked about?"
Well, I thought to myself that he was also a bit wicked. Belle stood there dumbfounded, probably wanting to say something but too shocked to speak. Finding her reaction amusing, my husband and I laughed until tears streamed down our faces. Unable to understand the situation, my brother crouched down to meet Belle's eye level, smiling broadly as he spoke to her.
"Well, we're going to head back. You take your time and enjoy Indonesia."
Saying this, he lightly patted her shoulder and left her with an insincere word of encouragement.
"Hang in there,"
before standing up. Unable to comprehend the words or the situation, Belle clung to my brother's leg, crying out, "Wait, please explain what's happening." Overwhelmed by anger and confusion, Belle exploded emotionally. "Why is he here? Why are you even trying to leave? What about me? You're just going to leave me here alone?"
"You were the one who said Catherine and the others should go back. I only came on this trip because they were here. I never wanted to enjoy it alone with someone like you."
"What?"
"You'll have plenty of work to do here. There's lots of volunteer work. You won't have time to be idle. Leave the rest to me."
With that, David pried Belle off my brother, holding her firmly to prevent her escape. Even though David was over 70, he was still actively involved in construction, and not someone Belle could easily escape from. As we three were about to leave Belle behind, she remained caught by David, screaming towards us. "Coward! You've been deceiving us from the start." "Who's the coward here? This traitor?" My words were sharp, and I glared coldly at Belle. "You, I will never forgive. You'll pay dearly for hurting us."
"Too bad for you. Good luck with everything. Bye."
With that, my husband and I, leaving Belle still making a scene in David's arms, boarded the plane to America. Belle, penniless, had no choice but to earn her way back from Indonesia. Of course, that wasn't her plan. Unable to take a part-time job, she resorted to volunteering and scraping together small amounts of money David gave her to save for her return. But earning money was harder than she thought. During the high season, plane tickets were double the normal fare. The cost skyrocketed, making it nearly impossible to return without working tirelessly from dawn to dusk. Upon our return to America, our phones rang incessantly every day. Naturally, my brother experienced the same. Both of us blocked Belle's number due to her persistence. Belle, who hardly worked, struggled with physical labor, lost a lot of weight, and cried daily, longing to return to America. After nearly 3 months, as her visa deadline approached, David contacted her, signaling it was time to return to America. Finally, the climax. I thought our revenge on Belle was over. On the day we went to pick her up, we approached the airport with solemn faces. "There! How dare you leave me behind that day? Why are you here?" Seeing Belle upon her return, she was thin and sunburnt from working outside, clearly showing how much she had been exploited by David. Her changed appearance made it obvious. We greeted her with smiles. Her anger at being abandoned surged, but her loud voice quickly faded into a whisper, because there was another person with us, my brother and my husband, and one more.
"Belle, I'm sorry. Let's break up."
To everyone's surprise, the person we brought was Belle's lover and my former middle school classmate. Actually, while Belle was in Indonesia, we had been in touch with him. Luring him to my house was easy, then confronting him with my brother was even easier. We laid out all the evidence of his affair and made sure he knew we were aware of his family.
Do you understand the consequences if I take this to court?
We cornered the lover. Tears flowing, he immediately begged my brother for forgiveness, pleading not to tell his family, promising to do anything. Hearing this, my brother successfully convinced him to agree to break up with Belle in front of us upon her return. This is how we brought him to the airport. Wait, this can't be real. Why? Why are you here? Break up? Wait, why in front of him? Belle was exhausted, and this turn of events was overwhelming. It's no wonder her thoughts couldn't keep up. Panic was evident on her face, fearing the revelation of her affair, but it was too late for her. We felt no sympathy for her, nor did we owe her any explanation. My husband and I silently watched my brother's actions, glaring at Belle.
You must have had your fun until now, haven't you?
No, please wait. It's not like that. Please, don't say anything more.
Our life together ends here. Let's get divorced.
No, I don't want that. Please. I won't ever do this again. I'll live honestly from now on, so please don't talk about divorce. Belle, back in America, was in utter disbelief and cried hysterically. Abandoned by her lover and now disowned by her husband, she experienced true despair. I watched her cry and scream with cold eyes, realizing how much a person can lose control in such a situation. Please, I'll do anything, just not divorce. Belle clung to my brother's legs, sobbing and pleading. She seemed not to care about the eyes of those around her. You said anything? Hearing her say anything, I walked over to where Belle was. Noticing my approach, Belle clung to me, apologizing profusely and begging. I'll do anything. I'm sorry for everything I've done to you. Please persuade him not to divorce me. If anything means anything, then never show your dirty face to us again. Honestly, just seeing your face makes me sick. I spoke these harsh words to Belle, who was crying and begging, filled with all the resentment and hatred I had. Hearing this, Belle fell into deeper despair and was at a loss for words. After that, everything happened very quickly. Exhausted, Belle didn't argue back and was practically dragged home by her brother and the person she had cheated on her spouse with, where they started the divorce proceedings. Belle was in a daze for a while, bedridden and barely able to eat, feeling cornered, but she knew it was her own responsibility. No one was supposed to feel sympathy for her. Eventually, Belle recovered enough to hold a conversation, and she got divorced from her husband. Now she's living a life just manageable enough to get by all alone. And so our peaceful daily life returned, and we decided to thank David again. Back then, I did pay my brother back for the huge shopping and dining expenses, but to my surprise, he refused to accept it.
You guys made my divorce and revenge possible. Let me pay for this. I'll thank you properly later.
So we decided to graciously accept his offer. This time, we ended up going to Indonesia for a celebration party. We enjoyed the trip, relishing the cuisine we couldn't fully appreciate during our last visit, and we got a chance to see the architectural work David was involved in.
I ain't gonna be the one looking after the old lady. Same here. These shocking words from my husband and sister-in-law marked the start of our discussion at my in-laws. My brother-in-law and his wife and I froze in response. Why don't you and Sarah take care of her if you're so concerned? We don't need the burden of an old woman in our home. My sister-in-law spat those words at me and my brother-in-law, with my husband just staring at us without a hint of remorse. How could they cast aside their own parents who had raised and loved them so easily? I was flabbergasted, and for the first time in my life, I felt an intense anger. But my husband and sister-in-law were oblivious to a surprising truth about my mother-in-law. Sarah and her family will be taking care of me. Do you think $1 million will cover the car and my accessible living accommodations? What? We too were taken aback by this revelation about my mother-in-law. Simultaneously, my husband and sister-in-law were clueless that they had unwittingly dug their own grave. My name is Sarah. This year, I turn 40. Inspired by my parents, who were artists, I too pursued a career in art. Now I teach at a famous art school in New York. It's busy, but I love it because I get to work with American art. Through a family friend named Emily, I met and married her son Gavin when I was 26. We had our daughter Autumn the following year and our daughter Kate 3 years later. Now both my children are in middle school. I am living my passion for American art, inspired by my mother-in-law. I had hoped for a peaceful life with my family and my mother-in-law forever, but reality is not always kind. That harsh truth hit me when I received the news that my mother-in-law had suffered a stroke. She was a kind soul who loved me like her own daughter, having known me since I was a child through her friendship with my parents. But after my father-in-law, Ryder, passed away 3 years ago, she seemed to lose her spirit. I noticed this change and often visited her with my kids, spending time with her and even going on outings together. Slowly, she seemed to regain her spirit. However, one day, I was taken aback when my children called to say she had collapsed. I rushed to the hospital after explaining the situation to my boss at the art school. Upon arriving, I saw my husband, sister-in-law, and my kids having a heated discussion. "Dad, Aunt, why would you say something like that? Grandma is your real mom, right?" "Yeah, you need to think about Grandma's feelings too, not just Mom's." "Shut up. You kids have no business in this. Keep your mouths shut." Seeing my husband shouting at our children in the hospital and my sister-in-law glaring at them, seeing that they were not calm, I rushed over to them and interrupted their conversation. "What's going on here? Calm down. Can someone explain to me what happened?" Struggling for breath as I tried to soothe my bickering husband and children, my husband and sister-in-law both let out exasperated sighs, wearing annoyed expressions. "You're slow, Sarah. Deal with these kids, will you? They've been going on and on about wanting to see their grandmother, and it's getting on our nerves." "We have to be somewhere, so handle the rest, okay?" Just like that, they dumped the situation on me and left the scene. My husband often treats our kids and me differently. He doesn't seem to care about us. This happens all the time. And while he has a part-time job that keeps him busy 4 days a week, it's not like he's bringing in a lot of money. Worse yet, all that he earns, he spends on himself. Furthermore, including his part-time work, he's always out and about from morning till night. On the rare occasions that he's home, he's always fiddling with his phone or buried in a comic book. I've repeatedly asked him to help with the household chores and spend some quality time with our kids. However, he just ignores me or lashes out with harsh words, much like he did with our daughter earlier. After getting married and having children, thanks to the generosity of my parents-in-law's friends, I never thought our life would turn out this way. It makes me wonder if I should have given my marriage more thought when choosing a life partner. As for my sister-in-law, she behaves just like my husband, indifferent towards me, our kids, and even mother-in-law. And it's not just mother-in-law. She was the same way with my father-in-law when he was alive. If she's interested in anything, it's her job as a hostess where she gets to entertain young men. Therefore, she does absolutely nothing in terms of household chores or caring for mother-in-law at our shared home. Whenever mother-in-law tries to tell her something, she snaps back. "Geez, be quiet. Unlike you, I don't have that much free time. Being a hostess is a decent job for me, and it's what keeps me going." With a grimace on her face, she vehemently rebuffs mother-in-law and hardly ever takes her seriously. The saying, "parents' hearts are unknown to their children," could not ring truer in this situation, or rather, it's worse than that. At the sight of such atrocious behavior from their daughter and son, I was at a loss for words. Nevertheless, with mother-in-law currently undergoing surgery, my main concern was for her well-being. I continued to pray that the surgery would go smoothly. Amidst all of this, a certain someone arrived at the hospital, someone I had called on our way here. Sister-in-law, how is Mom? How is Mom doing?" It was Shane, the younger brother of my husband and sister-in-law, his wife Mia, who is 2 years younger than him, and their twin daughters, who are the same age as my children. The brother-in-law's family had rushed here for mother-in-law and were panting and drenched in sweat. Brother-in-law became a novelist after one of the novels he wrote as a hobby during his university days got published online and became a huge hit. After graduating from university, he became a novelist, got married 2 years later, and had twin daughters. Now, due to work, he has moved out of his parents' house and lives peacefully with his family of 4 in an apartment in the city. Well, she's still in surgery. It's uncertain what will happen. I see. There was nothing else I could say to reassure them. However, in the face of such vague, comforting words, the brother-in-law looked slightly relieved. Unlike his older brother and sister, brother-in-law genuinely cares for us and mother-in-law. Just like me, he was worried about mother-in-law, who had aged and become a widow. Therefore, he kept in touch with mother-in-law, brought his family back to his parents' house several times to check on her, which also served as a source of comfort and strength for mother-in-law. My in-laws were genuinely kind souls, and had always avoided saying anything more than necessary to my husband, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, since they were children. I suspect that this, unfortunately, resulted in my husband and sister-in-law becoming the way they are. The only consolation is that brother-in-law grew into a decent human being. A few hours later, the surgery was over and the doctor called us into a tiny room. "We've done all we could. She'll survive, but there will be lingering effects. She's going to need round-the-clock care from here on out," he told us, leaving me and brother-in-law's family breathless. It would be wonderful if mother-in-law could be healthy again. Not caring for her would inevitably mean dealing with my husband and sister-in-law more often than I'd like. Despite our reluctance, brother-in-law and I decided to call my husband and sister-in-law. They seemed bothered by the situation, but after a thorough explanation and persuasion from us, they finally agreed to talk about it. We had a meeting at my in-laws' house while mother-in-law was still hospitalized, and both my husband and sister-in-law attended. As soon as we started the meeting, my husband and sister-in-law began complaining, saying they weren't interested in caring for mother-in-law. "I ain't taking care of that old hag." "Same here." "What?" At those appalling words from my husband, both me and my brother-in-law's family froze. "Brother, sister, don't joke at a time like this. If you won't look after her, what's going to happen to Mom?" "Why should we care? You and Sarah can take care of her," she dismissively uttered, fiddling with her beautifully manicured nails. My husband, too, gave a nod, an expression of boredom etched on his face. "Then we should consider placing mother-in-law in a nursing home." "What nonsense. You're suggesting we use our money for that old woman? A nursing home? Are you kidding? That's just throwing money down the drain." At my husband and sister-in-law's outrageous remarks, my brother-in-law finally erupted. "So you're seriously abandoning Mom? Not willing to care for her or even put her in a facility?" "Shane, you're being annoying. If you're so concerned, why don't you and Sarah take care of her? We don't need a senile poor creature around." With a deeply exasperated expression, my sister-in-law spat out these words. My husband, too, was showing signs of frustration. At this point, I couldn't keep quiet any longer. "Hold on. What's the meaning of this? She's your mother, and Gavin's and Shane's, right? As if we care. Just because she's our mom, why do you assume we have to take care of her? Shane is her son too, so you and Shane can take care of her." "Sarah, you don't have formal qualifications, but you've been caring for Mom almost every day, right? So looking after her should be a piece of cake for you, right?" With that, my sister-in-law smirked in the most disgusting way, and I no longer had the energy to argue. The situation was the same for my brother-in-law's family. We decided to bring this issue up with mother-in-law first, then we left their home. As we were leaving, my husband smirked unpleasantly and said he wouldn't be coming home until this issue was settled. That they would so easily abandon their own mother who had raised and loved them. I was in disbelief, and for the first time in my life, I felt a deep anger. Days later, with heavy hearts, my brother-in-law's family and I visited the hospital where mother-in-law was admitted. When we entered mother-in-law's hospital room, she was in better spirits and greeted us with a smile. "Oh, Sarah and Shane, I'm sorry for being a bother." Every time we visited, mother-in-law would say something like this. "Mom, don't say such things. Look, we've brought your favorite grapes and pears. If there's anything else you'd like to eat, just tell us and we'll get it for you." Mother-in-law's condition had improved since she was first admitted, but as a side effect mentioned by the doctor, she had become paralyzed on her right side. As a result of her condition, she needed help from the nurses to eat, which had become quite difficult. Facing mother-in-law in this condition, my brother-in-law's family and I were hesitant, but we made up our minds to discuss our meeting with my husband and sister-in-law and propose living together at home. Really? I can't believe Olivia and Gavin would do such a thing to me. Saying this, my mother-in-law looked downcast, and that's when it hit me. She must have sensed somewhere deep down that she wouldn't be able to return to her own home anymore. In spite of it being my mother-in-law's house, my sister-in-law and her husband were living there. The bitter irony was, knowing her character, they would probably treat mother-in-law like a nuisance when she returned, likely forcing her into some kind of care facility. As I wallowed in my frustration, mother-in-law suddenly made a surprising request. "Sarah, could you please grab the banking card from the drawer of that desk over there?" With a serious look on her face, mother-in-law pointed to the drawer of the desk just next to her hospital bed. Inside that drawer were the valuable items, including the banking card, that I'd previously brought her from her house when I'd visited her in the hospital. I wondered what she could possibly need a banking card for, but fetched it nonetheless. Once in mother-in-law's hands, she opened it, revealing it to me and my brother-in-law and his wife. "I've got savings here. Could you and Shane make use of it?" Brother-in-law and I were flabbergasted at the sight of the banking card. It showed a balance the likes of which we had never seen before. In that moment, I became certain that I could show my husband and sister-in-law something they didn't expect. A few days later, brother-in-law and I called our spouses, asking them to come for an important meeting. The meeting would be at mother-in-law's hospital. My husband and sister-in-law showed their disdain when they heard about the venue, but bit when we added that mother-in-law had important matters to discuss regarding her future. They probably assumed she had decided to move into a facility and surrender the house and, of course, the money. The following day, my husband and sister-in-law showed up at mother-in-law's hospital room. Upon seeing mother-in-law, myself, our children, brother-in-law, and his family all gathered there, their faces turned sour. "Why are all of you here?" "Mom, we just want to clarify, what exactly do you plan to do?" Their questions hung in the air, and mother-in-law, her face serious, responded, "I allowed Sarah and Shane to tell you. I have crucial matters to discuss about our future. That's why I asked everyone to gather here." My husband and sister-in-law looked at each other, both with puzzled expressions. Then mother-in-law, taking a deep breath, addressed them. "As per your wishes, I will move out once I am discharged. I will no longer show up in front of you or interfere with your lives ever again." "What?" My husband and sister-in-law stared at mother-in-law, their faces akin to deer caught in the headlights. "Sarah and Shane have filled me in on everything. The conversation you had about me in my house, the way you called me a terrible burden and planned to cast me out. I know it all." "What the... Sarah, you... Way to spill the beans, Shane." "You two hold on, the conversation isn't over yet." My husband and sister-in-law shot me and brother-in-law a furious glare. However, a stern rebuke from mother-in-law quickly turned their attention back to her. "In exchange for my departure and our final goodbye, I'm asking both of you to leave the house as well. Naturally, I will be cutting ties and excluding you from any inheritance." What? The surprise on my husband and sister-in-law's faces was undeniable. From now on, I will be in Sarah's care. As I mentioned before, would $1 million suffice to make the house accessible and purchase a new car? What? Upon my mother-in-law's insistence, I pulled out the banking card I had tucked away in my pocket and presented it to my husband and sister-in-law. As expected, both of them were taken aback by the balance on the card. $1 million? How? What's happening? It's impossible. How does our mother, an elderly woman with no job, have this much money? It's your father's legacy, money he'd been saving all this time, okay? What? While my husband and sister-in-law looked even more confused, my mother-in-law started repeating the story she had shared with us a few days ago. According to her, my father-in-law was actually a wealthy man. When he passed away 2 years ago, she inherited his fortune of $1 million. My husband, sister-in-law, and even brother-in-law had been kept in the dark. The reason? Their father wanted to avoid gold diggers and thus had not disclosed his wealth to anyone other than my mother-in-law. Before his death, he expressed his wish for his children to use the money when they need it and entrusted all of his assets to my mother-in-law. Knowing this truth, my husband and sister-in-law were speechless, just like we were that day. Then my mother-in-law concluded, "I was planning to split this money between you two, but after understanding your true feelings, I've changed my mind. Olivia, Gavin, you are no longer my children. I want you to leave this house." My husband and sister-in-law were jolted back to reality by her cold dismissal. What? What are you saying? Gavin and I are your legitimate children too. The only child I have is Shane. Plus, I have kind daughters-in-law, Mia and Sarah. You don't know them. Start packing your belongings now, sever your ties with Shane and Sarah, and leave. Having only ever known my mother-in-law's kind voice, I was astounded to hear this harsh tone. It seemed impossible that both could come from the same person. Looking at her, she had a very strong, aggressive look in her eyes, one that wouldn't allow any objections from my husband or sister-in-law. I was so stunned that I couldn't speak, but I quickly collected myself and pulled out my idea card, putting it next to the bank card. "So here's the thing, Gavin. I'm taking this to City Hall right after," I declared. "What? Are you serious?" Gavin's eyes widened in shock as he saw the idea card I was brandishing. "This goes to show how much you must despise me, right? Don't worry about Autumn or Kate. I'll take care of them. You just go live your life the way you want to." What I was holding was a divorce application. In a fit of rage during a previous argument about his lack of help around the house, my husband had filled it out and thrown it at me. Initially, I thought to discard it, but decided to keep it tucked away just in case our life together became untenable. At the moment of my pronouncement, my husband started trembling, erupting in a loud outburst. His sister-in-law, followed suit, yelling and lunging at my mother-in-law. Thankfully, my brother-in-law and his wife managed to restrain the two of them, and they explained the situation to the nurses who had rushed over when they heard the commotion. Security was soon called. A few minutes later, the security officers arrived, subdued my husband and sister-in-law, and escorted them out of the building while they screamed incomprehensible protests. Afterwards, with the help of a lawyer arranged by my mother-in-law, I divorced my husband. I not only received a financial settlement from the divorce, but also custody of our daughters. My mother-in-law made arrangements through her lawyer so that her last will and testament left everything to my brother-in-law, ensuring her estranged son and daughter wouldn't inherit a thing. The family home was sold off by my mother-in-law, and my ex-husband and his sister were forced to move into a shabby apartment. They both took on part-time jobs, working long hours every day. Yet they still found time to blame each other for their predicament and bicker constantly, much to the annoyance of their landlord and neighbors. As for me, I had my mother-in-law move into my home after she was discharged from the hospital. as per her wishes. Together with my kids, we took care of her. It was no easy task, but since I was already used to helping her out, it wasn't burdensome. We maintained a good relationship and went about our day-to-day lives in peace.
Are you serious? You're struggling with money because you chose to be a housewife, right? I was taken aback by what my brother-in-law's wife said to me. I had suspected for a while that she didn't like me, but I never imagined she thought we were financially struggling. I knew there was some misunderstanding, but I never expected this shocking revelation. I had no idea at the time. My name is Emily, a 34-year-old housewife. My husband John and I are raising our 3-year-old daughter, Sarah, in a house we inherited from my parents. They moved to a nice condo nearby, so we don't have to worry about rent or other expenses. Life is financially comfortable for us. The only issue is my brother-in-law, Kevin. He lives nearby and often drops by, usually drunk, wanting to take John out for drinks, which annoys me. He's not satisfied drinking alone after happy hours with coworkers and friends, but I wish he wouldn't drag John into it. Kevin loves to drink, and when he's not at happy hour, he drinks at home, much to his wife Jennifer's dismay. Jennifer is not very sociable. She avoids eye contact and keeps her distance at family gatherings. It would be nice if someone like my mother-in-law could mediate, but she passed away 3 years ago. And my father-in-law, Daniel, is not the type to take charge. The other relatives don't want to step up because Daniel is the eldest, so his sister Elizabeth usually takes charge. Elizabeth is proudly single and was once considered the odd one out in the family. I admire her and follow her lead at family gatherings. Jennifer seems to trust Elizabeth a bit, as she relaxes around her and listens to her advice. But when I asked Jennifer, "Could you help me out here? Are you free?" she coldly replied, "I'm busy," making me feel disliked. Then one night, Kevin showed up drunk and started making noise through the doorbell, calling for John to come out and drink. I reluctantly let him in, reminding him to be quiet because Sarah was sleeping. In the past, his noise woke Sarah up, and I had to kick both him and John out. Since then, they'd been quiet when drinking at home. So I joined them in the living room after confirming Sarah was asleep. That night, Kevin was bragging about Jennifer.
"She's reserved but listens to me. She's a good daughter-in-law."
Curious about why Jennifer was cold to me, I asked Kevin, "Does Jennifer not like me? Did she say I did something?"
"No, she hasn't said anything. Oh, Jennifer has narrow eyes. You know, she said people sometimes mistake her for glaring. Maybe that's it."
Kevin had a point. Jennifer does have narrow, feline-like eyes that make her look beautiful, but I felt it wasn't just her facial expression that made me think she didn't like me. I wanted to say that, but considering Kevin might tell Jennifer, I thought it best not to press the issue. "Maybe I misunderstood. Sorry about that, Kevin." Kevin grinned.
"No worries. Jennifer often gets misunderstood like that, so I feel like I have to protect her."
Maybe it's better to think it was a misunderstanding. You can't get along with everyone, and sometimes even close relatives don't click. I decided not to worry about Jennifer. But then, on the next holiday, John and Kevin planned to go to a movie, and Jennifer and I were to join them. We left Sarah with my parents, so it felt like a break from parenting. John and Kevin paid for the movie tickets, so when Jennifer and I went to the restroom, I suggested we cover lunch. Lunch is cheaper than movie tickets. Don't you think that's fair? Jennifer frowned and glared at me. "Are you serious? You're a housewife because you're broke, right? And yet you're spending money on a day out? Do you even have the money to split the lunch bill?" I was stunned, not just by the amount she spoke, but also by her assumption that we were poor. It's true that John may not have a very high annual income, but he's not as worried about money as people say. Wait a minute, Jennifer. We're not struggling that much, I wanted to say, but Jennifer had already left the restroom. When we got out, John and Kevin were chatting happily, so it wasn't the right moment to bring up what Jennifer had said. At lunch, when it was time to pay, I forcefully said, "We had the guys pay earlier, so Jennifer and I decided to split this one." Jennifer gave me a dark look, but I made her nod in agreement and paid my half. It seemed like she had planned to pay for all four of us, making me wonder just how broke she thought we were. When we got home, I consulted John. "Do you know why Jennifer thinks we're poor?"
What? How did that even come up?
I recounted a restroom conversation to John, who looked puzzled.
I wonder why she thinks that. I make an average salary and you have rental income that we are saving. Why would she think we're broke?
But we're saving that money for Sarah's future just in case she wants to become a doctor or something. Don't count on it. John laughed.
You're such a worrier. You brought property to get rental income because you were worried about not having a pension. Now you're worried about Sarah's tuition?
Well, I can't help but worry. I've always been a worrier. I remember showing up an hour early for a job interview, only to get scolded by the interviewer. John always tells me not to worry so much, that things will work out, but I can't help it. It's just how I am. The reason I can be a stay-at-home mom without financial worries now is because I worked hard when I was young. I doubt this part of me will ever change. That's why I get anxious about my relationship with Jennifer. What if our relationship strains the bond between John and his brother Kevin? Just the thought makes me uneasy. I've been hoping to clear up any misunderstandings the next time I see Jennifer without making her angry. Then a few days later in the evening, as Sarah was watching a kids' show, I decided to start making dinner. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. I checked the monitor and saw Jennifer. I was surprised. Kevin visits often, but Jennifer had never come by herself before. "Jennifer, I'll open the door now." I welcomed Jennifer in, offered her a seat on the sofa, and served her some coffee. She looked around the room and said, "You live in a pretty nice house, huh?" with a displeased look on her face. "It's my family home. My parents moved to a condo, so it's just the three of us now." "So, no rent or mortgage?" "None." Jennifer suddenly looked down, trembling. Then she looked up, furious, and yelled, "So you do have an extra money? Stop pretending you're broke. Help pay for Linda's care." Sarah was startled and began to cry loudly. I immediately hugged Sarah, soothing her. It's okay. Jennifer's not mad. Don't be scared." As I comforted Sarah, she eventually calmed down and fell asleep. Jennifer also seemed to feel bad, lowering her shoulders and apologizing. Maybe she's not a bad person at heart. She mentioned something about Linda's care expenses, so she must be misunderstanding something. I told her, "Jennifer, I'd like to discuss this in detail. Can you wait here while I put Sarah to bed?" After putting Sarah to sleep, I returned to the living room. "I'm really sorry." "It's fine. But what were you saying about Linda's care expenses?" "Linda passed away 3 years ago." Jennifer looked puzzled. "What? Do you know Linda?" "No, I've never met her. Kevin told me his parents are divorced and he's taking care of Linda, who is in a nursing home. It costs $2,000 a month, so both of us are working hard to pay for it. But why should we be the only ones paying?" "So, that's why you were upset with me." Finally, I understood why Jennifer had been upset with me, and while I felt relieved, something still bothered me. Oddly, Jennifer didn't seem to resent John, who also wasn't contributing to the care costs. I wanted to know why. Jennifer provided the answer. "Kevin told me that John had asked you to contribute $1,000 a month for care costs, but you apologized to Kevin, saying you had too much debt to pay. You also told Kevin you are keeping this a secret from John. So I thought you were the only one at fault. What? Can we get Kevin here? And Daniel too? I'll tell John to come home early. This couldn't be left unaddressed. I immediately contacted Daniel, John, and Kevin to gather everyone. Before they arrived, I dropped Sarah off at my parents' house. John came home without working overtime, and Daniel showed up looking concerned. When Kevin finally arrived, I confronted him. Kevin, Jennifer told me you've been claiming Linda is alive and that you're paying $2,000 a month for her care? Where is that money going? Kevin turned pale and started sweating, visibly shaken. John and Daniel looked at Kevin in disbelief, but he remained silent. Jennifer told me that John had asked me to pay $1,000 to you, Kevin, and that I couldn't because I had debts which I was keeping a secret from John. What's going on? John finally spoke up.
What are you talking about? Emily doesn't have any debt. She's more financially savvy than anyone and even has income from real estate. Kevin, what's this about Mom's care costs?
Finally, Kevin began to confess.
I'm sorry. Before proposing, I found out Jennifer made more money than me. I thought about how to shift some of that money to me.
Jennifer's expression changed instantly, her face turning to one of fury. Kevin, now terrified, continued.
So I made up that Mom was alive and needed care costs. I thought if I claimed to contribute $1,000 and got Jennifer to pay the other half, our take-home pay would be about the same.
Daniel finally spoke.
I see. Whenever I brought up Linda, Kevin would change the subject. I thought he was still grieving. To use Linda's memory to scam people out of money. I didn't raise you to be this kind of person.
Daniel rarely speaks at family gatherings, so hearing him talk this much was unusual. He must be really upset. Kevin stood up, visibly frustrated.
This is ridiculous. I work the same hours as Jennifer, and our jobs aren't that different. In fact, her company is lower ranked than mine. She's even 2 years younger than me. Why is there a $1,000 difference in our monthly salaries? She's a woman. She should just keep quiet.
That's when Jennifer exploded. What? Do you know how hard I work as a student? I was top of my class and student council president since middle school. I studied day and night to get into a top university. Didn't you say you didn't care about college exams? I have what I have now because I worked for it. Don't be jealous. Jennifer took a deep breath, having said her piece. I also had something to say to Kevin. Using a non-existent care cost for Linda, who isn't even alive? What kind of person does that? Didn't you think this would come out eventually? Kevin was at a loss for words, so I turned my attention to Jennifer. Don't you think something was off, Jennifer? Neither John nor Kevin ever talked about Linda or visited her in a nursing home. Your anger is justified. Kevin did something unforgivable. But I wish you'd question things instead of taking his words against me. Jennifer apologized. You're right, Emily. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. It's okay. You're a victim too. I hope we can get along better from now on. I smiled and Jennifer returned it, seeming relieved. Then Daniel spoke, his eyes sternly fixed on Kevin.
Kevin, what you did is unforgivable. It's fraud. A criminal act. Sadly, marital income is shared property, so we can't legally punish you.
Kevin looked oddly relieved, but Daniel wasn't done.
As your father, I'll impose the punishment. First, return all the money you took from Jennifer. Then, meet all her requests as much as possible. Jennifer, if he refuses, tell me.
Kevin turned pale again, casting a pleading look at Jennifer. Jennifer thanked Daniel and then glared at Kevin. I'll think about what to do. Be prepared. Kevin was tearfully apologizing to Jennifer. Maybe he realized the path his life was taking. Later, I heard Kevin had to borrow money to pay Jennifer back, even after emptying his savings. The money he'd taken was mostly spent on drinking. Jennifer filed for divorce, leaving Kevin financially ruined and even canceling the lease on their apartment. Kevin sought help from John, who couldn't defend him this time and turned his back on him. Then he turned to Daniel, who advised him to go to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, living alone in a modest apartment, moved to a place they should share. But she took over managing his salary, banned happy hours and drinking, and warned him she'd kick him out if he broke the rules. Kevin now obediently does household chores as told. Since then, peace has returned to our lives. It's really quiet without Kevin around. John seems a bit lonely, but when Sarah talks to him, he looks happy. I hope he'll dote on Sarah as much as he would have on Kevin. As for me, I've reconciled with Jennifer, and we occasionally go out together. We surprisingly have a lot in common and enjoy our time. I want to cherish these peaceful days from now on.
Seems like Mom really likes the new house. Starting today, we'll be living with my parents, Lonnie exclaimed. What? If you don't want to live together, then leave, Mother-in-law retorted. I couldn't grasp what they were talking about. I'm Elaine, 27 years old, a housewife and currently pregnant. Lonnie, my husband, is 30. He works at a company. With our baby on the way, we thought, with a baby, there'll be crying at night. Instead of a cramped apartment, we want a spacious place to raise our child. So we decided to build a new house on father-in-law's land. Now, with a new house comes meetings with the architectural designer. I was thrilled. I want a kitchen this color. I dream of a bathroom like this. Everyone gets excited thinking about their ideal designs and functionalities. A baby and a new house. It felt too good to be true. But something felt off. Every time we had a meeting, Mother-in-law was always there. Why is Mother-in-law always joining us? When I asked Lonnie, he said, Mom renovated her house 3 years ago. It's good to get advice from someone experienced. During one meeting, Mother-in-law insisted, we need an oratory, a big space for our statue of the Virgin Mary and an altar. Wait, that big statue of the Virgin Mary? It's an old statue at their family home. A space just for that? And an oratory? I'd prefer a regular room over an oratory. They're hard to maintain. I tried to explain, but she cut me off. A house isn't a home without an oratory. Why does Mother-in-law decide everything about our house even if she's not living with us? When I asked Lonnie, he said, Mom has experience with home renovations, and I've never gone wrong listening to her. But when will we ever take that statue of the Virgin Mary? Maybe after father-in-law and mother-in-law pass away. Can't we get a smaller one? Space in a house is precious, right? I argued, but he shouted back, Are you trying to badmouth my mom? What's your intention? I didn't want a guest room we might never use. At the next meeting, I tried to negotiate with mother-in-law again. I don't think we really need a guest room. But she interrupted. You think that because you're young, you'll need it eventually, and a guest room can also be a place for family to relax. Oh, and make sure there are no steps. Make it barrier-free, and add handrails to the stairs. In the end, the house was built according to mother-in-law's wishes. An oratory, the statue of the Virgin Mary, barrier-free design, stair handrails, and a guest room we might not use for years. I tried to argue until the very last moment, but Lonnie kept saying, Mom knows best. Don't speak ill of her. The fact that I couldn't be more assertive was because the house was being built on father-in-law's land. Of course, not having to pay for the land means lower repayments. But accommodating all of mother-in-law's requests would naturally increase construction costs. I was frustrated about paying extra for a guest room. The architectural designer tried to help by suggesting cost reductions, but mother-in-law would say things like, Money spent joyfully will come back to you. Finally, our new house was completed. Despite everything, the completion of a new house is a joy. The smell of new wallpaper was exhilarating. The scent of a new house is truly wonderful. A few days after moving in, mother-in-law and father-in-law came over with housewarming gifts. Thanks to you, we could buy this wonderful new house, I greeted them. It's true. If we had to buy the land, we probably wouldn't have been approved for a large loan. Father-in-law smiled and said, "The smell of a new house is really something. Now you're ready to welcome the baby. There's nothing happier for me as a grandpa." Imagining his unborn grandchild, he smiled warmly. Lonnie proudly showed his parents around the new house, pointing out the guest room and the oratory with a statue of the Virgin Mary. All that was left was to wait for the baby to be born. But then, something unexpected happened. On a Sunday morning, as we were having breakfast, movers showed up at our door. "Good morning. We're here to deliver some items." They rang the doorbell, but I had no idea what they were talking about. I went to the entrance and asked, "Are you sure you have the right address?" But sure enough, our address was listed for the delivery. What? As I was trying to figure out what was going on, I heard the ring of a bicycle bell. It was mother-in-law. She parked her bike in front of our house and energetically began directing the movers, "Put this here." What's going on? I was dumbfounded. Suddenly, Lonnie came out and nonchalantly said, "Mom liked the guest room, so they're moving in with us from today." What? Suddenly, movers started bringing in boxes, and then came the announcement that they'd be moving in. I mean, seriously? Seriously? Then my mother-in-law snapped, "Why are you just standing there? You're in the way of the movers." She grabbed my shoulder and shoved me. I wasn't just standing there, I was in shock. If I were my usual self, I would have snapped back. But there was too much to process, and my brain couldn't keep up. Seeing my pale face, mother-in-law seemed to realize something. "We've been considering moving in for a while. At first, I just wanted advice, but then it started to sound like a good idea. So we decided to live here. But what's with that look? If you don't like it, you can leave. This property belongs to my Lonnie. It's our house." I had plans for the guest room. I thought of placing a cradle and baby items there. It was supposed to be the baby's room. But now, it's going to be my in-laws' room, and they're kicking me out? I couldn't accept the situation and stepped outside. I needed to cool down. Even though it was spring, the outside air was still chilly. It was the perfect temperature to cool my flushed cheeks and clear my head. Then a thought struck me. Wait a minute. What about the house they renovated 3 years ago? I headed to my in-laws' place. As I approached, my father-in-law was at the entrance. "Father-in-law," he turned to me and said, "Let's go back to your house." When we returned, the movers were gone, and most of the stuff was inside. "Back so soon? Are you agreeing to live with us? Or did you prepare yourself to be kicked out?" Mother-in-law, sipping tea with Lonnie in the living room, smirked. "If you're leaving, pack your stuff." Father-in-law stepped in front of mother-in-law. "Hey, my wife, let's go home. If you don't like it, you can leave this house and our life." "What?" Mother-in-law dropped her teacup, spilling tea everywhere. "Why? We agreed to live here. Lonnie approved it too." She looked at Lonnie for confirmation. He nodded. "I agreed because Mom wanted it." Lonnie says it's obvious. Father-in-law was furious. "When will you stop blindly following your mother? Grow up!" I had never seen father-in-law so angry. Lonnie was taken aback. "My wife, she's changed," father-in-law said with a shaky voice. "Where did you get that spend money to make money idea?" Mother-in-law was cornered. "What?" I exclaimed, recognizing those words. "I know about that too." Hearing this, father-in-law sighed. I thought so. He then shared the story. It was all fun and games when we folded a $10 bill to make it look like $100. But then she started spending recklessly, believing that spending money joyfully means it'll come back to you. She even donated $5,000 worth of charity raffle tickets, saying it was to attract more money. Wait, what? $5,000? She bought raffle tickets and then donated them? As I tried to contain my shock, mother-in-law blurted out, "It's true, because it was on the internet." The internet? I couldn't help but raise my voice even louder than mother-in-law's. So you're basing everything on the unpredictable nature of internet information? I tried to piece my words together. I couldn't believe mother-in-law's justification for donating a bulk of lottery tickets to charity was based on something she read online. But she was dead serious. Just search for money-saving habits or money-attracting charms. You'll see. Here, look. Mother-in-law thrust her phone towards me. I couldn't hold back my laughter. Searching for charms? Why are you laughing? Because it's funny. Honestly, how could anyone not laugh? As mother-in-law continued her rant, turning red in the face, I couldn't stop laughing. Beside her, father-in-law said, "I know, right? If she wasn't my wife, I'd be laughing too." Seeing father-in-law's defeated look, I felt bad and stopped laughing. It's heartbreaking to see your hard-earned money wasted like that. Father-in-law continued, "That's why I wanted to help you while I still had some savings. I feared she'd eventually go after my land." He glanced at mother-in-law. "I didn't want you two to suffer because of her misguided beliefs. I thought it was for the best, especially for our future grandkids." But Lonnie interrupted. "Why are you bad-mouthing Mom? Even you, Dad?" He stepped in front of mother-in-law, defending her. I was furious at Lonnie's attitude. I couldn't believe Lonnie's attitude and the way he spoke. I was done with both Lonnie and his mother. I thought I'd protect my father-in-law. I decided to stand up for my father-in-law. I approached Lonnie. Your mother's belief that the internet is always right and your idea that whatever Mom says is right are the same. It's sad to see both of you can't discern the truth from misinformation. My father-in-law had always endured his wife's wasteful spending. I was probably the first one to ever stand up for him. "Elaine, thank you," he whispered. "I thought I did enough by letting you build a house on my land, but I was running out of savings because of my wife." She then said, "People and money, they go where the money is," suggesting we move in with Lonnie since he has money. It's beyond just believing everything on the internet. Their way of thinking is just bizarre. They're like hermit crabs moving from one shell to another. But Lonnie and his mother kept saying, "But it's natural to go where the money is, right? If Mom wants to live with us, let her." That's why Lonnie even built an oratory and got a statue of the Virgin Mary. They kept ranting about how Mom is always right and the internet is always right. Their absurdity was so overwhelming that my father and I just exchanged glances. If this was the Lonnie I first started dating, I would have said, yeah, keep saying that, bye, and left him. But now that I knew how my father-in-law felt, I couldn't just walk away. I felt a burning sense of justice. After all, he would be the grandfather of my future child. "First off, you're wrong," I firmly told his mother. "Just because it's on the internet? Why don't you search superstitions or nonsense? I'm not against superstitions, but if you want more money, working is more realistic than donating to a lottery. If you'd spend the time you wasted complaining about the new house working part-time, you'd have earned some dollars by now. And you'd realize the effort it takes to earn that money and how hard my father-in-law worked to earn what you wasted." I then turned my attention to Lonnie. "And you. You blindly believe everything your mother says, and you don't even realize you're being taken advantage of. I can't trust you to guide our child if they ever lose their way. In short, I want a divorce." "What?" Lonnie was taken aback. In contrast, his mother spat out, "Fine, just leave." But it was my father-in-law who silenced her. "I want a divorce too." She turned to him in shock. "Yeah." Mother-in-law suddenly looked back at father-in-law. However, there is no island that haunts father-in-law. "But I never wanted to live with my son and his wife. I just renovated my house and I plan to stay there. Just like Elaine gave up on Lonnie, I don't have the energy to support you anymore. Marry the internet if you want." He continued, "The house is still in my name. Lonnie, you should leave. Do whatever you want with your mother. The house belongs to Elaine and our upcoming baby. The baby should grow up with someone who can make sound judgments." "What?" And so, both couples headed for divorce. 6 months later, after the divorce mediation, my father-in-law and I lived in our respective homes, while Lonnie and his mother were kicked out. Mom is always right. Lonnie, who seemed brainwashed into repeating this, was told, "Why not live with mother-in-law as she wishes?" To which he responded, "All right, I will," and began living together in an apartment. Later on, it seems my ex-husband came to visit father-in-law. "Even if I do everything Mom says, I don't make more money. I need a loan." But he was promptly turned away. Father-in-law, now retired and working as a contract employee, still keeps busy. He enjoys attending his chess club and seems to have a lot of fun there. "Now that she's gone, I can save money again." Every now and then, he'd buy toys and visit Gran's, looking very happy. When Gran started laughing and playfully nudging his grandpa's foot, "I've started seeing someone," father-in-law shyly shared. "Turns out she's from his chess club. She's very sharp in her tactics. Seems like she analyzed me well and chose me." "That's great!" Both father-in-law and I beamed with joy.
"Gosh, a farmer that doesn't even have a degree? A filthy woman covered in dirt? No, thank you."
I wasn't quite looking forward to this arranged date to begin with. My date sat across from me, and the moment I told him that I ran a fruit farm, he rejected me with a loud voice. My mom and I pour our hearts growing and harvesting our produce, yet he even threw our strawberries at us. I was taken aback. I was speechless at first. As I stood there shocked, he sneered and left the room. But a few days later,
"I got transferred to some rural, remote area? You must have done something."
I got a call from him and he was enraged. He went off ranting at me. I waited for him to run out of breath so I could explain myself. When he found out the truth about me and our matchmaker, he became flustered. My name is Jennifer Henderson, 27 years old. My family runs a rare fruit farm. Running a fruit farm, my parents never got a day off, but they always loved working on their farm and never complained about their work. I would join my parents at work and help them every day after I got back home from school. Before I even knew it, my dream was to succeed my parents and become a full-fledged fruit farmer. However, everything changed after one tragic day. Just as I started 5th grade, my father collapsed. We rushed him to the hospital, but we found out that he was in the terminal stage of a severe illness. Apparently, he had been having symptoms for a while, but kept them to himself, because he did not want me and my mom to get worried. He got hospitalized right away, but despite being treated, he passed away after a few months of battling his illness. My mom and I were now in charge of our fruit orchard. Even as a 5th grader, I could see how tough it was for my mom back then. She lost her husband, and now she had to work as a fruit farmer on a large plot of land, practically alone, all by herself. I am nothing but grateful to my mother who raised me single-handedly, even under such circumstances. Despite having only one parent, I never felt disadvantaged and I was able to start high school. I chose an agricultural high school because I wanted to help my mother. With my classmates in high school, I was serious about my studies, so I could help my mother out as soon as possible. After graduating high school, I started working at our family's fruit orchard right away. I wanted to protect their orchard, so I actively incorporated what I learned at school and what my fellow farmers I met through school taught me. One of the things I incorporated was promoting our fruit through social media to get more people to know about it. This continuous effort apparently paid off, and word about our orchard slowly started spreading through social media. After that, we set up a direct sales store and started selling our unsightly fruit there. We decided to sell our fruit that was still great in taste but had lost its market value due to deformities or damages. To our surprise, it was quite popular. And not only our neighbors, but also people from far away started coming to our store. The store took off after several trial and errors, and we received positive comments from our customers too. A few years passed like that, and one day my mother said, "I'm glad things are going well," as she let out a sigh of relief, to which I agreed. Then one of our regular customers, Mr. Miller, brought up a topic saying, "I have something I'd like to discuss. Jennifer, are you interested in trying a blind date?" A blind date? Mr. Miller is a refined gentleman. He always buys a lot of our fruit. Mr. Miller looked a bit troubled, nodded, and smiled. Apparently, someone he knows suggested arranging a blind date for me. Honestly, I wasn't interested in going on a blind date anytime soon, but Mr. Miller is our precious regular customer. I wanted to help him out, if there was anything I could do. "He's said to be a nice man. If you don't feel any spark after seeing him, you can turn him down," said Mr. Miller, and now it was even harder to refuse his offer. Well then, I'll try seeing him. With a light heart, I decided to accept the proposal for a formal meeting. After a while, the preparations for my date started in earnest. That being said, Mr. Miller did most of the preparation for me. I felt bad about it, but he took on the task saying, "I'm the one who suggested you the date." According to Mr. Miller, the mediator from the other party who brought the blind date proposal also seemed to be pleased that I accepted. Seeing Mr. Miller's relieved face, I felt that I could be of some help to him. The blind date took place in a luxury hotel in downtown, something like a high-end hotel in Manhattan. On the day, my mother and I left home early in the morning, and when we arrived at the hotel with time to spare, we were guided by a staff member to a private room. I was nervous waiting for my date. Edward Jefferson was the name of the gentleman I was meeting, an elite from a major food manufacturer. I was well acquainted with his company because of my work, but since I hadn't interacted much with them before, I was slightly on guard. In an attempt to shake off my anxiety, I shook my head lightly and waited for Mr. Jefferson and his party to arrive. About 5 minutes had passed from the appointed time. The door opened and 2 men and women, led by a young man, came to our table. It was Mr. Jefferson and his parents. "Nice to meet you. I'm Edward Jefferson. I'm honored to meet you. I've been looking forward to this day." "I'm Jennifer. Likewise. I look forward to spending time with you today." We introduced ourselves briefly at the table. When Mr. Jefferson finished introducing himself and fell silent, his parents seated next to him spoke next. "We have always been committed to providing our children with the best education from a young age in order to raise excellent children. I had heard that he was an elite from a major food and beverage manufacturer, so I had expected him to be an excellent individual from an early age. However, I didn't expect his parents to start off with such a statement. My mother and I were slightly surprised and responded with, "Oh, really?" Edward himself was also nodding to his mother's words. From there, an unbearable amount of boasting about the Jefferson family began. From the heroic tales of their ancestors dating back to the feudal era to their recent trips to overseas resorts, they went on and on. My mother and I just nodded in agreement, and my neck hurt from all the nodding. I had heard from Mr. Miller that they were good people, but I was worried that the meeting would end with just listening to their stories. However, while the family was getting all chatty, they suddenly turned to me as if they remembered something. "By the way, what was your profession, Jennifer?" I thought Edward should have been informed about my occupation beforehand, but I replied once again, "I'm a fruit farmer." Then Edward's expression froze for a moment. "Huh?" As I was wondering, Edward looked at his parents, his face a mix of disbelief and curiosity, and asked me again, "Are you really Jennifer?" "Yes, I am. I am Jennifer." Even when I said that, Edward had a look of disbelief. "And you run a fruit orchard?" "Yes. My parents originally ran the orchard. I went to an agricultural high school, and since then I've been running my parents' orchard. I lost my father at a young age, and because it's been just my mother and me, I've always wanted to be a help to her. As I explained my background, Edward's expression gradually changed. He looked at me as if he was seeing something unpleasant, and his parents next to him had the same look. Although I found his reaction a bit strange, I called over a staff member and asked him to bring something I had arranged beforehand. These are the strawberries that we grew at our place. Please try them if you would like. On each of their plates, there was a single splendid strawberry. These are the finest strawberries from our orchard. However, upon hearing this, Edward's face twisted instantly. Are you looking down on me? It's decent courtesy to present them in a wooden box. Edward grabbed a strawberry and threw it at me. The strawberry that hit my chest squished and its juice splashed. Ah! It all happened in an instant. I couldn't understand what was happening. As my mother and I stood there dumbfounded, Edward and his parents began to speak, still angry. I got an offer from my boss to see you, which is why we are here. I thought you were some corporate heiress, but you're a farmer? Excuse me? What are you talking about? Your boss? I asked in confusion. I couldn't understand why Edward was angry. Of course, I have never met Edward's boss. I'm guessing that Edward's boss is Mr. Miller's friend or something. However, I guess my response triggered him. From watching your behavior, I can tell. My boss must have mistaken and arranged the wrong person for me. Edward spoke with such force that he was practically spitting. Gosh, a farmer that doesn't even have a degree? A filthy woman covered in dirt? No, thank you. Honestly, I never thought I'd be spoken to so harshly upon our first meeting, and I was so surprised that I couldn't find any words to say. However, as I started to process all that he had just said, my anger began to simmer. It was him who mistook me for a corporate heiress, although I even handed him a brief document about me. So why was I getting yelled at like this? What's wrong with being a farmer? Suppressing my rage, I tried to respond as calmly as possible. I'm glad to hear you say that. After hearing your comments, I feel strongly inclined to decline. Thank you for your time. There was a lot more that I wanted to say. But I kept thinking of Mr. Miller, who has always been kind to me, and I couldn't say anything more. I wouldn't have agreed to this meeting if it weren't for Mr. Miller. I was never interested to begin with. As I sarcastically thanked Edward, he sneered and quickly left the room with his parents. He must have thought I was just acting tough, but I didn't feel like correcting him, so I just picked up the squashed strawberry that had fallen on my lap. My mother watched this with a sad expression. Seeing my mother's face made my heart ache. We put in so much hard work to grow our strawberries. How dare he treat them like trash? Right after the meeting ended, I decided to tell everything about the incident to Mr. Miller. When Mr. Miller heard our story, he was very surprised, saying, "That's not what I heard. I was told he was a gentleman." And he apologized to me and my mother. Clearly, Mr. Miller is not at fault here. We don't know whether the person who brought up the date had lied to Mr. Miller, or if that person genuinely didn't know about Edward's personality. But I know Mr. Miller genuinely thought Edward was a gentleman. Please don't apologize. It's all in the past now. I was planning to forget about the incident as a bitter memory, but then a few days later, I was out in the orchard when my mother came running up to me in a panic. I got a call from Edward. Edward? I wondered why Edward, who had acted so rudely at our meeting, was calling. I rushed back to my office, answered the phone with a sense of disbelief.
What on earth did you do?
Before I could even say hello, I was yelled at so loudly over the phone that his voice seemed to crack. Surprised, I almost dropped the phone on the floor. Why are you yelling all of a sudden? What's going on? I tried to respond calmly without being affected by Edward's emotion, but on the other end of the phone, Edward seemed to be furious, raising his voice even more.
I got transferred to some rural, remote area with my father. You must have done something. I know it's you. Did you tell on me to my boss?
Upon hearing this, I guessed that Mr. Miller must have relayed my story to our matchmaker. He went off ranting at me. I waited for him to run out of breath so I could explain myself. Isn't it your fault for doing something that your boss wouldn't approve of in the first place?
Hey, so it was you, wasn't it?
Let me be clear. I don't even know your boss, so I didn't rat you out. However, I did talk about the incident to the mediator, the person who suggested I see you.
The mediator?
Edward's voice became a little suspicious. Apparently, he had forgotten that there was a mediator on my side as well. Initially, this blind date was mediated by Mr. Miller, the chairman of a major department store. Did you know that?
Huh? The chairman?
I could hear Edward's deflated voice. I couldn't tell whether he understood or not, but I was planning to wait for Edward's reaction. Edward, you looked down on our orchard, but it's actually a high-end brand in our industry. We even received a proposal for a partnership from a company where you work. Did you really not know that? Huh? A brand? A partnership? What are you talking about? Even after I said all this, Edward on the other end of the phone was only getting more confused. Apparently, he really didn't know anything. In fact, we had received partnership offers from the food manufacturer where Edward works several times. However, to maintain our quality, it was difficult to increase the number of dealers, so we had to turn them down. When I received the blind date proposal and found out that the partner worked at this company, I immediately suspected their motive. Edward's boss probably thought that by arranging a date between Edward and me, they could establish some kind of connection. I knew this, so I wanted to refuse the offer. Thanks to Edward acting on his own, I was able to reject him without feeling guilty, so I actually got lucky.
So, what does this mean? I thought it was just another orchard.
His initial confident attitude had completely vanished. His tone had dropped significantly, filled with anxiety and confusion. I didn't know whether he was talking to himself or asking me for an answer, but he might have finally understood the implications of his actions. In the end, there was one more thing I had to tell him, so I called out. Edward, the strawberry you threw at our meeting, each one costs $100, and they are not easily available because they are all pre-ordered.
$100 for a single berry?
I heard the most flustered voice of the conversation from the phone, which made me feel slightly relieved. It's the best strawberry produced at our orchard that you look down upon. I was shocked by how you reacted, but maybe it's good that someone like you didn't have it. I vented all the things I couldn't say during our meeting. Edward was speechless, in shock, and I quickly hung up the phone. After hanging up, I felt a sense of accomplishment, and I felt like the frustration I had been carrying since the meeting had been resolved. According to Mr. Miller, just like Edward said on the phone, he and his father were both transferred. They were transferred to a rural area, far from the city center, which seemed to be a humiliation for them, having always lived in the city. As someone who's worked with soil and fruit every day and loved it, I can't understand their feelings at all. Probably he will never be able to return to the fast track, said Mr. Miller. Since he ruined our meeting that could have secured him a bright future, I guess it was a sensible decision by the authorities. After that, Mr. Miller, who felt responsible for this incident, asked me, could you give me one more chance? I will introduce someone I personally know well this time. So I decided to have another blind date. After what happened last time, I had no intention of ever going on a blind date again, but the man Mr. Miller brought along was the kind of person who could overturn such feelings of mine. He was an easygoing employee from Mr. Miller's company. He listened attentively while I talked and responded joyfully to my stories. And when he saw the strawberries I brought out, he was full of interest, exclaiming, I've never seen strawberries like this before. How do you grow them? We hit it off on the blind date, and after a year of dating, we decided to get married. I want to be by your side, Jennifer. You grow such wonderful strawberries, and I want to help, he said. With those words, he quit his job, moved to our farm, and began to work with us. My mom also shed tears of joy, saying, it's great to have such a wonderful son-in-law. I truly feel so lucky to have someone as warm-hearted as him by my side. I believe that with him, we can continue to protect the farm that my parents cherished. As I cherish my happiness with my family, I want to continue growing delicious fruits that everyone will love.
A colleague has died in an accident. Immediately, my husband changed into his black suit and hurried off to the funeral home. His haste was out of the ordinary for just a colleague's funeral. Suspicious. Arriving at the funeral home where my husband was, an incomprehensible sight caught my eye. Unbelievably, my husband was acting as the chief mourner. Upon learning this fact, I was on the verge of raging with anger. He has betrayed me again. I will never forgive him. My name is Lily. I married my husband Keith 4 years ago. We both love to travel and have journeyed to various places, both domestically and internationally, 2 to 3 times a year. But now those trips are on hold because I'm currently 8 months pregnant. I've always wanted a child, so I nearly cried when I found out I was pregnant. While it might seem like smooth sailing from this description, I do have one concern. That is, my husband's infidelity. In fact, Keith cheated once just before we got married. The other woman was someone he met at a company-sponsored drinking party. The reason I found out about the infidelity was because I happened to see a message from her. A message arrived while Keith was in the bathroom, and I inadvertently saw it. The woman's WhatsApp icon showed a cute-looking female. I'm sure she used her own face as the icon. The icon read, Amy. Unfortunately, I discovered his infidelity the day after we sent out our wedding invitations. I was furious and confronted Keith. What's that message about? Are you cheating on me, by any chance? I'm sorry. It was just a lapse in judgment. Keith hastily bowed his head in apology. When I thought about becoming a married man, I felt a little lonely, but I promise I won't do it again. The only one I truly love is you, Lily. Given that our wedding preparations were underway and the invitations had already been sent, I decided to forgive him this one time. If you ever cheat on me again, I will never forgive you. With that emphatic statement, I had been trying to trust Keith since then. He was delighted when he found out about the pregnancy and still whispers words of love to me. I don't want to think that my husband could betray me again, but Keith has been acting a bit strange recently. That's because he started going to drinking parties frequently. Ever since his pre-marriage infidelity, he declared that he would not attend company drinking parties. Perhaps this was his own form of atonement. Instead, he often drank alcohol with me at home. But when I found out I was pregnant, I became absent. While I was satisfied with non-alcoholic drinks, it seems my husband was not. About a month ago, Keith suddenly said, I want to go to a company drinking party. I feel awkward about being the only one drinking alcohol, and I want the person I'm with to drink too. Of course, once the baby is born, I'll stop going. Is it okay if I attend drinking parties just during your pregnancy, Lily? 4 years into our marriage, he had truly been devoted to me. Even though Keith was clearly in the wrong for his infidelity, he reflected on his actions, came straight home after work, and helped with household chores. He spent most of his time with me. I hadn't forgotten about his affair, but at that time, my feelings of wanting to trust my husband were stronger. I decided to let Keith attend the drinking party. Then my husband happily said, Thank you. Of course, I won't go to the after party. I'll make sure to tell you by the day before when I attend a drinking party. Oh, that's right. I'll also come home with some desserts. What would you like? Well, the strawberry sponge cake from the bakery in front of the station. I'm pregnant, so I need to watch my weight. But it's fine when you're at a drinking party, right? But Keith only informed me about attending a drinking party the day before and bought me a cake just once. After that, he somehow ended up attending after parties. And there were many days when he came home after the day had changed. My heart felt uneasy with my husband's behavior. Feelings of wanting to trust and feelings of anxiety got all mixed up. Still, I felt reluctant to restrict his drinking party since I couldn't drink alcohol myself. I didn't want to bring up his past affair either. I have no choice but to trust. So I reassured myself and waited for my husband's return with a prayerful heart every time he went to a drinking party. That day was sunny, so I decided to rinse the newborn clothes. Having the tiny onesies on hangers to dry, just that made me feel wrapped in happiness. I can't wait to meet our baby. As I thought, with my hand on my belly, Keith, who had been sleeping, woke up. Oh, doing laundry? It makes me feel like baby is going to be born soon, right? I got so happy just hanging them up. Let's go shopping for the things we need together next time. Speaking of which, my mother-in-law said she'd buy us a crib. She wants us to let her know when we decide on the one we want. I have had a good relationship with my mother-in-law, who lives in the neighboring town since before we got married. Our relationship has become even better recently, thanks to my pregnancy. Cooking must be hard, right? She even comes to bring me some dishes. The opportunities to talk on the phone with my mother-in-law have increased. Don't worry, I'll come help out frequently after you give birth back home. Lily, you just need to think about the baby. Leave the rest to me. Her genuine excitement for the birth of her first grandchild makes my mother-in-law's presence very comforting. My husband often says this to me. My mom is really sweet to Lily, huh? I wish she'd be kind to me, too. Not to me, but to our baby. Well, she's really good to me, too. Conversations like this make me think that my anxiety about my husband might be overthinking. I'm about to become a mother, so I shouldn't be anxious about small things. Just when I thought that, Keith's smartphone rang. He seemed to not recognize the number displayed on the screen and had a puzzled expression on his face. Keith, feeling that the incessant call was not just a nuisance call, quietly picked up the phone. Hello? My husband answered the phone with a probing voice. The color drained from his face in an instant. He stood still for a while without saying anything, but then he pulled himself together and left the room. Feeling something was amiss, he turned ashen and began rummaging through the closet. What's wrong? Lily? Where's my black suit? I need it urgently. A black suit? What happened? Don't tell me. Something happened to your parents? No. My family is fine. It's a colleague. She died in an accident. A colleague? Although relieved that his in-laws were safe, there was something odd about my husband's behavior. For just a colleague's accident, he was in a tremendous hurry. Changing into the morning suit I had handed him, he left the house, his bed hair still uncombed. Suspicious. Thinking this, I opened the GPS app. When we were traveling, we once lost each other, and since then we kept it just in case. Was he hailing a taxi? The pointer indicating my husband's location was rapidly moving away from our house. The place where the pointer stopped was a funeral home. Determined, I decided to head to the funeral home, praying that my suspicion was just a needless worry. Keith, sitting in the front row, where usually the main mourner sits, that seat would normally be occupied by the mourners, and that woman. I recognized the face in the portrait. In that woman, Keith had an affair with before our marriage. Her name, I think, Amy. Keith stood up and began to give a eulogy to the attendees. Unable to comprehend the situation unfolding before my eyes, I was frozen in place. I loved Amy with all my heart. I regret not having met her earlier. If I had met Amy before getting married, I wouldn't have married at all. We talked about being together someday, and just the other day my divorce was finalized. I'm deeply regretful that it has come to this. The moment I heard this eulogy, I heard something snap inside of me. Divorce? Finalized? What is he talking about? Lying nonchalantly about being divorced at a funeral? How many times does he have to betray me for his satisfaction? I won't forgive him, never. I confronted Keith, who had just finished his eulogy. Noticing this, he widened his eyes in surprise. Lily? Why are you here? That's not the point. What's the meaning of this? Explain it clearly. I told you earlier, didn't I? A colleague died in an accident. As my husband's voice grew smaller, mine became louder. Why are you the one hosting at a colleague's funeral? You'll give a satisfactory explanation, won't you? That's well. I remember this woman's face, I can't forget it. She has an unpleasant memory. Why are you hosting for this woman? She's the one you had an affair with, isn't she? My voice drew attention of the attendees. Keith, desperate to control the situation, faced the interested gazes. Calm down, Lily. There's a reason for this. It's not the relationship you're thinking about, trust me. But I continued to press him. A good reason? Let's hear it. If you want me to trust you, give me a satisfactory explanation. And what's this about being, quote, divorced? I'm still your wife, aren't I? I'll explain later. Please, be quiet. My husband gradually became irritated and eventually blamed me. There are people related to her here, don't you know? Isn't it rude? Arguing at a time like this, don't you feel embarrassed? Rude? Who's the one being rude here? You're the one lying to everyone. Look, everyone's watching. You're going to give an explanation that everyone else can accept, right? Explain why you said the divorce was finalized when you haven't even divorced me, your wife. Shut up. Just be quiet for a moment. If you want me to be quiet, then explain it right now. As Keith and I glared at each other, a woman approached and suddenly slapped him in the face. A loud smack sound reached our ears. What? Surprised by the sudden event, Keith let out a startled voice. The woman shot a sharp glance at my husband and raised her voice as much as I did. You despicable man! We were fools for believing in a man like you, both Amy and me. Tears flowed from her eyes as the woman screamed loudly. I thought she should have stayed away from a married man. that you said you'd divorce your wife and that you truly loved Amy, so I supported you. That's why I asked you to be the chief mourner this time. But this betrayal is just awful. This woman seemed to be Amy's coworker. She had heard that Keith and Amy had reconciled about a month ago, and they were seriously considering marriage, so she supported them. Amy, who had no family, seemed to have adored this woman like a sister. And yet, she couldn't stand the fact that Keith hadn't even discussed the divorce with me, his wife. Upon learning the truth, I was also furious. I was so angry with myself for believing in such a man. I should have never forgiven him back then. I should have thoroughly condemned him for cheating, even once. I glared at my husband. Didn't I say back then that I would never forgive you if you cheated again? Don't think I've forgotten. We're getting a divorce, and I expect proper compensation. Wait, please. It was just a moment of weakness. I had a drink outside after so long and let my guard down. Do you really think I can put up with being cheated on twice because of a moment of weakness? This time I absolutely won't forgive you. I'm divorcing you no matter what you say. After all, you wanted the divorce, right? If you had met Amy first, you wouldn't have married me, right? As I sent a challenging look, borrowing Keith's words from his eulogy, he nervously glanced around, sweat forming from his forehead. Well, I had to say that or things wouldn't have been settled. That's true, isn't it? I'm not even a family member, but I'm the chief mourner. I had to say something like that or nobody would have been satisfied. I had no choice but to lie. I didn't want to lie if I could help it. What a desperate excuse. He's truly a hopeless man. I pressed my husband further. You probably told Amy that you were serious about the future and lured her in, didn't you? That's why you were in this mess. Stop playing the victim. Yes, Amy is at fault for cheating, but you created this situation. This is all on you. You reap what you sow. It's Amy's fault for taking those words seriously. Most people wouldn't believe that, would they? At my husband's words, I lost it. Don't mess with me. What do you think people's lives are, you trash? Becoming single and start your life over from scratch? I'll tell your parents about this. I'll raise this child. A man like you doesn't deserve to be a father. No, I don't want that. I won't divorce you, Lily. I want to build a happy home with you and our child. Cut the crap. Who would want to be with you? If you thought like that, you wouldn't have cheated in the first place. How much do you have to ridicule people to be satisfied? You're the worst. Wait, please, Lily. I violently shook off Keith, who was trying to pull my arm forcibly, ripping his hand away. Lily, wait, Lily! I heard my husband's cries, but I didn't look back as I left the scene. I immediately headed to my in-laws' house, sharing everything that had transpired. Upon hearing this, my father-in-law and mother-in-law, livid, summed up Keith to their house. Keith's face was stern when he arrived. Ignoring his demeanor, my mother-in-law berated Keith. What on earth have you done, Keith? Cheating at a time like this? And for the second time, not only have you betrayed Lily, but you've also deceived the other woman. You're no longer a son to us. We're cutting ties with you. Following the irate mother-in-law, my father-in-law also raised his intimidating voice. You're never setting foot in this house again. You'll carry the weight of your sins for the rest of your life. But Dad, Mom... I gently patted Keith, who was crouching on the floor. Keith quickly lifted his face, his eyes pleading for help. Ignoring his plea, I handed him a piece of paper. What's this? Yeah, it's a divorce paper. You'll fill it out right here, right now. Your parents agree with the divorce. Now, please, write quickly. I don't have time. I have a lot to do, including moving and preparing for childbirth. Are you serious? Can you raise a child alone, Lily? At my husband's words, I could feel myself losing my temper. You're the one who did this. It's too late to worry now. I have no intention of letting a lowlife like you hold our child. I'll rely on my parents, and your parents have said they'll help too. I don't need your help. I'll raise this child to be a wonderful person. Perhaps because I yelled at him with such force, Keith reluctantly signed the divorce papers. The topic of alimony and child support also came up, and we decided he would pay a lump sum amount, 3 to 4 times the average. It seemed like I wouldn't have to worry about money for a while. Afterwards, Keith began working a night shift to pay off the debt he accumulated from the alimony. He was working day and night without any time to drink or date anyone. On the other hand, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl a few months later. I'm currently living at my parents' house, doing the best to raise my child with their help. Even though we're divorced, I still keep in touch with Keith's parents, and they came over to my parents' house to see their granddaughter the other day. They brought many gifts and looked lovingly at their granddaughter. I dream of going on a trip someday with my parents, my daughter, and my in-laws. Right now, I am fully committed to raising my child. Looking forward to that day.
My name is Rachel. I'm just your average sophomore in college. My dad runs a hospital. My mom is a stay-at-home mom, and my younger brother and sister go to different high schools. So yeah, we're better off than most families, and I think that's a good thing. But even so, our family dynamics are far from ideal. I'll be home late again today. My dad says this as he grabs his bag and puts on his shoes. My mom replies, watching him go, "All right, be careful." But dad leaves without even looking at mom's face. This scene has become so routine that none of us, my siblings or me, feel anything anymore. Dad, who seems to live for his work, rarely pays attention to home life. He hardly ever attended school events when I was younger, so we have all kind of given up on him. And I think his attitude has been hard on Mom. "Mom, I'm heading out too." "Okay, be careful." Yeah, I leave the house as usual. And once I'm out, I feel a slight sense of relief. I'm aware that I might start treating Mom coldly, just like Dad does, especially since Mom tends to worry about me a bit too much. I never felt this way in middle or high school, but since starting college, I have noticed it more. If I'm a bit late coming home from club activities or dinner with friends, or if she can't reach me while I'm at work, she becomes hysterical and blames me. It seems a bit excessive, but maybe Dad's coldness is the reason she's like this, and then one day, tragedy struck our family.
"Oh, doctor, are you okay? Hold on."
Dad collapsed suddenly at work. He was examined immediately and had to be admitted to his own hospital. Apparently, it was a temporary episode caused by overwork. Thankfully, with proper rest, he'll be fine. Seeing Dad lying there with his eyes closed, I felt a bit scared. It's not that I didn't believe the attending physician. I understood the diagnosis because Dad is always busy. As we all knew, he was too busy even to look at us. Our family should have known that. But still, when a family member collapses, it's natural to worry. And I think Mom felt the same way. She's been going to the hospital every night since Dad collapsed. Oh, Rachel, you're home early today. Yeah, one of my classes got cancelled. I see, your dad was awake just a moment ago, but he's asleep again. Mom says this with a gentle look on her face, but I can see she's clearly exhausted. It's no wonder with all the housework and hospital visits. Why don't you go home and rest, Mom? I can stay with Dad. We have leftovers for dinner, so you don't have to worry about that. When I say this, Mom looks a bit surprised and then nods in agreement. Really? Then maybe I will. Thank you. As she says this, Mom stands up from her chair and reaches for the door to leave the hospital room. But before opening it, she turns back to me and says, "Rachel, make sure you come home before it gets too late." "Okay, I will." With a slight smile, Mom nods and quickly opens the door so as not to wake Dad, then leaves the room. Mom's really tired, isn't she? I murmur to myself as I sit in the chair Mom was just in, looking at Dad's sleeping face. I never knew he looked like this when he sleeps, but that's understandable. I have never known any other version of Dad than the workaholic who's always busy. When I get home, surprisingly, my sister Natalie is already there. "Hey sis, you just got home?" "Yeah, what about you, Natalie? No club activities today?" "Nope, we had a practice match yesterday, so dinner or shower first?" Natalie asks, twirling around in her petite frame. Seeing my cute sister, I feel a bit relieved and say with a small smile, "Let's go with dinner first. Have you eaten yet?" "Yeah, I already ate. Christian is probably still studying at school. He should be back soon, though." It's exactly 7 p.m. My brother Christian will probably be home around 7:30 at the earliest. "All right, change into your loungewear and come to the living room. I've prepared my special menu for today." "Didn't we have leftovers from yesterday?" "Yeah, but it felt a bit bland, so I made some salad and soup too." The table is set with yesterday's leftovers along with freshly made salad and soup. "Thanks, Natalie. It's delicious," I say with a slightly relaxed tone. Natalie washes the dishes with a slightly shy smile. "Where's Mom?" She already went to bed, didn't even have dinner. Is she not feeling well? I don't know. She was already asleep in her room when I got home, and there were no dinner dishes, so I guess she didn't eat. She must be really tired. I see. I murmur, looking down at my dinner, searching for the right words. Then Natalie speaks up with a somewhat serious tone. Hey sis? Yeah, what's up? Don't you think Mom's been acting a bit strange lately? Do you think so? As I'm about to continue, Natalie, who has finished washing the dishes, sits down and says, I mean, she is visiting Dad way too much. I get that she's worried, but he collapsed from overwork. She doesn't have to go every day. Isn't that a bit excessive? Well, that's just Mom being overly concerned, I start to say, searching for the right words to follow, but Natalie interrupts. Also, I actually saw what was in Mom's bag when she was going to visit Dad the other day, and guess what I found? She places something on the table that she took out of her pocket. What is this? A few days later, after my college classes are all done, my mobile phone rings. It's Mom's number on the display. Hello, what's up? Rachel? Mom? What do I do? He is... With a shaky voice, as if she's on the verge of hyperventilating, Mom tells me that Dad has passed away. Upon hearing this, I cancel all my plans and head to the hospital. When I arrive, I go to the room where Dad had been sleeping and open the door. Inside, the attending physician, the nurse in charge, and Mom are all looking down at Dad, who has his eyes closed. Noticing me, the attending physician speaks up. We're still investigating the details. This morning, the nurse noticed something was off when checking on him despite our best efforts. As he says this, both the attending physician and the nurse bow their heads to Mom and me, tears in their eyes. Hearing these words, Mom clings to Dad's lifeless body, crying. I just keep looking at Dad's face, which looks as peaceful as if he's sleeping. After a while, my sister and brother arrive. Both seem too shocked to speak or cry, listening to the doctor's explanation with a surprisingly calm demeanor. At the funeral that soon follows, a variety of people, including Dad's relatives, attend. I'm surprised at how many people show up, likely because Dad had been the director of the hospital. It feels like all these people had been a part of Dad's life. Sometime after the funeral, several of Dad's colleagues, a lawyer, and some relatives visit our home to discuss the inheritance. I happen to be home because my college classes are canceled, so although I'm not keen on it, I join Mom for the discussion. The conversation is very subdued, mainly focusing on legal matters regarding the inheritance. In this solemn atmosphere, Mom says, My husband passed away peacefully. We will use his inheritance wisely. The room falls silent for a moment, but then all of Dad's colleagues burst into inappropriate laughter. Both Mom and I are at a loss for words. After the laughter, one of the colleagues says, I apologize for the laughter. It's just that what you said was so absurd, it made me laugh in indignation. What? So you actually believe you're entitled to his inheritance? That's what was so funny. The colleague looks at Mom with a calm gaze. Confused, Mom replies, What are you talking about? Of course I am. I'm his wife and he died from overwork. As she says this, Mom glares at him, but then the colleague says, You're quite the actress, aren't you? What do you mean? Another colleague speaks up in response to Mom's question. What I'm saying is exactly what it sounds like, ma'am. Did you think we wouldn't notice? What? Be honest. What did you put in his IV? Mom is at a loss for words. An abnormal amount of sugar and salt were found in his body. It's a life-threatening amount if ingested all at once. And if it was administered through an IV, it would be absorbed even faster. The colleague then takes a sports drink bottle out of his bag and places it on the table. What's that? This is a sports drink available in our hospital's vending machine. We compared its ingredients to what was found in his body and they almost completely match. Are you saying I put this in my husband's IV? That's exactly what I'm saying. At this point, Mom raises her voice hysterically. Don't be ridiculous. Do you have any proof that I did such a thing? We do have proof. The colleague places a plastic syringe next to the bottle. Huh? This syringe was found in the waiting room's trash can, along with the bottle, on the morning he passed away. But we, medical professionals, would never dispose of a used syringe in a regular trash can. He glares at Mom and continues, "Your fingerprints and the sport drink's ingredients were found on the syringe, and your fingerprints were also found on his IV. So you definitely tampered with it." As they said this, I stared at Mom. Mom can't say anything in response. Her silence is an admission of guilt. That day, Mom is taken away by the police. A few days later, I visit someone. "Rachel, are you sure about this?" "Yes, thank you for everything." I bow deeply to the colleague. I was the one who tipped him off about the syringe. He had carefully investigated everything after the funeral. "If it weren't for the janitor telling me about the syringe, I wouldn't have known either, but I feel guilty for taking your mother away from you." "It's okay. The mom at that time was no longer our mom." I bow again. I could only think of Mom, who had shed fake tears at the funeral, as a stranger now. Later, I visited Mom once to ask her why she did it. Then, "Mom, it's obvious. If everything had gone as planned, all his inheritance would have been mine. I have been enduring and pretending all this time." Muttering to herself, Mom was clearly unhinged. Seeing her like this confirmed that her tears, words, and actions had all been lies. I realized she could never be part of the family again. Now, my siblings and I are living with our paternal grandfather. I hope to have a real family this time.